With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown. Our top stories: progress update on Charlestown Police Station renovation in Nevis. IMF Executive Board concludes 2025 Article 4 consultation with St. Kitts and Nevis. Forestry and climate change being examined in Guyana. China pledges deeper ties with Latin America and the Caribbean. Internationally, Burkina Faso attack. Al-Qaeda affiliate says 200 soldiers killed in attack on military base. Now, the details. The renovation of the Charlestown Police Station on Nevis advancing with optimism. The Honorable Spencer Brand, Minister of Public Works for the Nevis Island Administration NIA, recently shared encouraging updates on the project's status. Addressing on-site progress, Minister Brand acknowledged that while the renovation process has been slow and tedious, the results are promising.
I am particularly pleased to see the progress. It has been slow, it has been a tedious process. But I think based on what I'm seeing here, at the end of it, I believe that our security forces will be much more comfortable.
The minister further highlighted the partnership driving the project.
I want to say that this has been a partnership between the federal government and the NIA. The NIA would have given some technical support. We are hoping that we will see this project completed by mid-year, and during that period we will make the necessary transition back to this base of operation.
The project involved the Nevis Island Administration refitting a building to serve as the temporary location for the Charlestown Police Station during renovations. The Public Works Department Building Division was tasked with overseeing the refitting process. The move was necessary because of health concerns expressed by the officers housed in the original building, illustrating the administration's commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of the security personnel. Once renovation is complete, the original edifice on the island's main road next to the fire station will feature enhanced facilities and an improved environment.
We are certainly looking forward to see the Charlestown Police Station newly renovated, much more enhanced safety and security, and the health environment as well, much improved for the benefit of our security forces.
Brand also expressed gratitude to all involved in the project and reinforced support to the officers.
I certainly want to say to our security forces, we are standing with you, and once this project is completed, you will see that we...
Currently, the officers are stationed at the Winston Skeet Complex on Low Street, Charlestown, awaiting the transition back to their improved station. The refurbishment will include upgraded facilities for the police operational departments, administrative offices, and the District C Magistrate Court, enhancing the site's overall functionality. The construction is part of a broader infrastructure and road network enhancement initiative spearheaded by the Nevis Island Administration, demonstrating a multifaceted approach to the community development. Minister Brand's remarks underscore the vision of creating a safer and healthier environment for law enforcement personnel and the public. The International Monetary Fund's Executive Board has completed its 2025 Article 4 consultation with St. Kitts and Nevis, and the government has approved the publication of the staff report. The consultation outlines the country's economic landscape, which includes a modest post-pandemic recovery coupled with significant fiscal and structural challenges. Despite a robust rebound after the pandemic, the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis experienced a slight slowdown in 2024, with real GDP growth moderating to 1.5%. This deceleration, primarily due to weaker contributions from the tourism sector and government services, does not overshadow the overall resilience of the economy. Inflation eased to around 1%, influenced by lower global commodity prices and subdued economic activity. Tourism remains pivotal, with stay-over visitors nearly back at pre-pandemic levels, although cruise ship arrivals have yet to fully recover. For 2025, the IMF projects a modest pickup to 2% growth, driven largely by expanding tourism activity. Over the medium term, growth is expected to rise to about 2.5%, underpinned by significant energy projects, particularly in renewable sources. Despite positive growth prospects, the fiscal health of the Federation faces significant hurdles. The fiscal deficit widened sharply to 11% of GDP in 2024, predominantly due to a steep decline in Citizenship by Investment (CBI) program revenues, from 22% of GDP in 2023 to just 8% in 2024, following recent reforms aimed at enhancing due diligence and program integrity. This substantial revenue drop, underperformance in the corporate income taxes, and sustained current expenditures have strained public finances. Although government deposits dropped to 10% of GDP, gross public debt was relatively contained at 52% in 2024. However, without corrective measures, public debt is projected to escalate to over 70% of GDP by 2030, raising concerns about fiscal sustainability and sovereign debt stress risks. The authority's 2025 budget anticipates a narrower deficit of around 4% of GDP, partly based on an optimistic rebound in CBI revenue and planned expenditure controls. Nonetheless, the IMF staff projects the deficit to remain at 10% of GDP for 2025, attributing much of this to structurally lower CBI inflows and fiscal pressures from current expenditures. Notably, a temporary reduction in the standard VAT rate from 17 to 13%, along with a social support program, is expected to incur additional fiscal costs in early 2025. Despite the acknowledgement of fiscal deficits projected to continue, St. Kitts and Nevis and much of the Caribbean struggle to access concessionary loans to alleviate some of the financial pressures and fund initiatives that would, in the long run, improve the Federation's or the region's fiscal position. During the May 13, 2025 broadcast of the Roundtable, Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew, pointed to these issues following the 2025 IMF World Bank Spring meeting in April.
Presently, to access concessionary funding or get certain grants, they would look at your GDP per capita. For St. Kitts and Nevis, we have a high GDP per capita, and so we can't get access to certain concessionary loans and grants, so we are excluded from certain programs. Our argument to them is that we might have a high GDP per capita, but we are very small. Our economy, our GDP is about $3 billion, 3-point-something billion dollars. That's easy. That's just over 1-point-something billion US dollars. Very, very small. So even though the per capita is high, our ability to implement significant transformational projects, that ability is hampered by the fact that we have an overall small GDP, though the GDP per capita is high. The GDP is the total, and per capita mean divided by population. We have a small population. So therefore, our GDP per capita will reflect high. Yet, to implement, for example, geothermal, you know how much the geothermal cost? Total cost might be $400 million US dollars. That's already, if you convert, that's already a big part of our total GDP. Just one project, right? The hospital, for example, look, let's say it costs overall a couple $100 million EC dollars. That's already about a quarter of our annual budget. But we need it. So we are saying to them, don't just look at our GDP per capita. Look at our vulnerability. Because though our GDP per capita is high, if we get a major hit by a hurricane, that gone down the drain. The CBI totally disappear overnight with nothing to replace it, that gone down the drain. And therefore, we are very vulnerable. That is why we have to rush towards a sustainable island state, to take away this vulnerability, to become more resilient. And so, yes, that was put forward. And the MDVI has been accepted at some levels. And so we are seeing advancement with that. So SIDS are being looked at. So this is being accepted more and more. But we want it to be fully accepted.
The financial system exhibits mixed signals. Private banks have improved by reducing non-performing loans, NPLs, and strengthening capital adequacy. However, vulnerabilities persist. Credit growth surged by 10% in 2024, fueled by strong demand for mortgage loans and rising competition. Credit unions, albeit smaller, experienced even faster expansion, with concerns over elevated delinquency rates. The Development Bank of St. Kitts and Nevis remains fragile, suffering from high NPLs, weak capital, and inadequate regulatory oversight, creating a contingent fiscal liability. The IMF underscores the urgency of financial sector reforms, encouraging ongoing efforts to bolster bank sector resilience, reduce NPL ratios, and enhance regulatory frameworks, particularly for credit unions. Establishing a sovereign wealth fund to manage CBI revenues is regarded as a positive step aimed at smoothing fiscal revenue volatility stemming from the program. The consultation highlights deeper structural economic issues. Potential growth has gradually declined over recent decades, mainly due to sluggish productivity gains and diminishing human capital contributions. Labor market mismatches, including skill shortages in private sectors such as tourism and healthcare, complicate competitiveness. In response, the government has initiated efforts to align education and vocational training with market demands, aiming to counteract these trends and foster inclusive growth. The energy transition is a pillar of the country's medium-term strategy. Large renewable energy projects, including a transformative geothermal initiative advancing towards the drilling phase, are expected to enhance energy security, reduce costs, and stimulate economic diversification. This transition presents significant upside potential for growth, competitiveness, and fiscal revenues. Given St. Kitts and Nevis's high vulnerability to natural disasters, the IMF stresses investment in resilient infrastructure and an enhanced multi-layered insurance framework. Key recommendations include integrating disaster-resilient projects into the public investment program, upgrading the power grid to connect the two islands via renewable energy sources, and expanding water infrastructure through desalination plants and well development. These measures are vital to mitigate fiscal and economic shocks from future climate events. IMF executive directors commended the authorities' commitment to prudent fiscal and structural reforms amid significant challenges. The board urged a decisive fiscal consolidation to stabilize public debt below the regional ceiling and reduce dependence on volatile CBI revenues. This entails mobilizing tax revenues, controlling current spending, and improving expenditure efficiency through anchored fiscal rules. Efforts to strengthen financial sector stability must continue, with particular emphasis on the Development Bank's restructuring, reducing NPLs, and reinforcing regulatory oversight over credit unions. Further transparency and governance improvements to the CBI program are also critical. Directors highlighted the need to implement structural reforms targeting labor market alignment, improved government service delivery, and enhanced credit access. Accelerating the renewable energy transition is vital for long-term competitiveness. Finally, improving natural disaster preparedness through robust investment and insurance frameworks remain a top priority to safeguard economic resilience. St. Kitts and Nevis stands at a crossroad as it balances challenges arising from fiscal pressures and slower growth against opportunities offered by renewable energy and structural reforms. The IMF consultation underscores a multi-pronged approach: fiscal discipline, financial sector reform, economic diversification, and disaster preparedness to ensure the Federation's sustainable and resilient development amid global uncertainties. It is important to note that the staff report projections are based on the information available as of March 27, 2025. Therefore, they do not reflect the impact of trade tensions since April 2, 2025, and all other implications following various pauses and deals. In regional news, forestry and climate change being examined in Guyana, News Source Guyana reports.
That biodiversity. That is why these meetings, this coming together of minds, is so key and critical. But what is most important as we confront these global challenges is the strength of our partnership, the strength of our collaboration, the strength of our cooperation. And that is why Guyana and the UK, we are placing a lot of energy, a lot of resources and effort behind this initiative. We cannot afford for this initiative to fail.
Climate and forest leaders must accelerate their activism and the work they do through partnerships. The president said countries must strike a balance between forest preservation and development.
We have to demonstrate how the forest can stimulate economic and livelihood opportunity, improving the model that livelihood does not come as an opportunity cost of keeping the forest. And here in Guyana, I want to humbly position that we are in the process of building a model that is allowing this aspect of the equation to be solved by investing revenue from carbon sales back into the communities to enhance livelihood option, to enhance infrastructure, and to create opportunities within the forest itself. And then we have to leverage this brand.
Mr. Ali referenced Guyana's Low Carbon Development Strategy 2030, under which the Hess Corporation is purchasing high-quality carbon credits for a minimum of $750 million between 2022 and 2032 directly from the Guyana government. Under the arrangement, indigenous communities across Guyana are in line to get at least $112 million to fund development projects. Already, some have started to benefit. President Ali said countries must leverage the brand of forests in the world to influence social spending and behavior.
In Guyana, we have seen this firsthand. Over 1,300 projects are being led by indigenous communities, building food systems, investing in health and education, and choosing to keep their forests standing. By investing in our indigenous people, today, more than 60% of the new entrants in our nursing program are indigenous Guyanese. And more than 50% of that 70% are women. These are the real stories.
The program comprises 32 countries with immense forest cover. Collectively, they advocate for climate financing to enhance economic advancement. Guyana and the United Kingdom are currently co-chairing the organization.
China pledges deeper ties with Latin America and the Caribbean. Triple T Live Online has the story.
President of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, has made it clear that no matter how many changes take place in the world, China will always support Latin American and Caribbean countries. He made this statement at the opening ceremony of the fourth ministerial meeting of the CELAC Forum on Tuesday.
To continue building a community with a shared future between China and Latin America and the Caribbean, LAC, President Xi Jinping said China will launch 5 major programs. President Xi said China will implement a people-to-people connectivity program where government scholarships will be given.
In the next 3 years, China will provide CELAC member states with 3,500 government scholarships, 10,000 training opportunities in China, 500 international Chinese language teachers scholarships.
Another is the Solidarity Program, where over the next 3 years, China will invite 300 political officials from CELAC member states to visit China each year.
China will work with LAC countries to support each other on issues bearing on our respective core interests and major concerns. We must enhance exchanges in all fields and strengthen communication and coordination on major international and regional issues.
Through the development program, China will provide a 66 billion yuan, the equivalent to 9 billion US or 62 billion TT dollars credit line to support LAC's development.
We should expand cooperation in emerging areas such as clean energy, 5G telecommunications, the digital economy, and artificial intelligence, and carry out the China-LAC Science and Technology Partnership.
The other projects include a civilization and peace program. Daniel John, TTT News.
We now bring you these international reports.
In Burkina Faso, there are reports that 200 soldiers have been killed in attacks by an al-Qaeda affiliate. It happened in the northern province of Loroum. The attacks follow an earlier assault in which 60 soldiers were killed at a military post in the same province. Nearly half of Burkina Faso is not under government control, and attacks from armed groups linked to al-Qaeda on the rise, not only in Burkina Faso, but other African countries in the Sahel. Let's go to Nicholas Hack. He joins us from Dakar. Nicholas, what more do we know about what happened?
Well, this attack took place in Djibo. That's around 200 kilometers away from the center of power in Ouagadougou. And according to an eyewitness, a teacher that works in the school of Djibo, he says the atmosphere currently is of fear, smoke, and destruction. It was an attack that lasted not hours, but days. And one of the major military outposts that's supposed to protect this town of about 200,000 people was razed to the ground. Such is the violence, or such is the firepower of the armed groups that was used during this attack. It's not just Sole, it's Djibo, it's also the town of Diapaga, where there was, according to eyewitnesses, Russian mercenaries involved there. So this is one of the deadliest attacks in Burkina Faso. And it comes just at a moment where Ibrahim Traoré has been saying that the country has been gaining territory, actually encouraging people to go back to their homes. But this latest attack proves the opposite. But there has been no confirmation from the government of this attack just yet. Marlene?
And Nicholas, explain to us the context here, because this is just the latest violent attack this month, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, just yesterday, an armed group, so Jamaat Nusratul Islam wal Muslimin, that's based out of Mali, that's claimed responsibility for this attack, killing 200 soldiers in Burkina Faso, launched an attack also on Ivory Coast, Mali, Burkina Faso, 3 countries under attack by one armed group based out of Mali. This is a blow to these military juntas, especially I'm talking about Mali and Burkina Faso, that have been saying that they've been gaining ground. Well, it seems that there's more and more soldiers that are dying. Now, I spoke to one military official from Burkina Faso's armed forces. He says that those numbers are exaggerated, but there is a video circulating on social media from the Al-Qaeda affiliate warning people to leave their homes, that they will continue to invade large territories. And what we're seeing here is a pivot point where these armed groups that normally attack villages are now trying to take over towns. It's a major blow for Burkina Faso's armed forces. And it comes just as Ibrahim Traoré was visiting Russia, saying to Vladimir Putin that it needed more training, more arms to fight off armed groups.
Palestinians mourn in Tamoon in the occupied West Bank after Israel's military killed 5 men. Hours earlier, a pregnant settler was killed in a shooting. Hardline pro-settler leaders, including a far-right minister in the Israeli government, called for Palestinian towns to be razed. The military said in a statement it had killed 5 terrorists and arrested a 6th who had barricaded themselves in a building in Tamoon, following an exchange of gunfire and the use of shoulder-fired missiles by Israeli soldiers. It was not immediately clear whether the Tamoon operation was linked to Wednesday night's shooting. Tamoon is about 22 miles from the Israeli settlement the pregnant woman lived in. Zila Gez was shot while travelling to hospital with her husband to give birth and was pronounced dead at the hospital. Her baby was delivered by caesarean section, Israeli media reported. There was no immediate claim of responsibility for the shooting, which drew strong condemnation from Israeli leaders. It happened during one of the largest Israeli military operations in the West Bank in 2 decades, and while the Israeli military continues to bombard Gaza. The Palestinian Wafa news agency said the Israeli military was demolishing the house where the Palestinian men had been killed. As retribution for Gez's death, Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said Israel should flatten the nearby Palestinian towns of Brooklyn and Azawiyah, just as it has razed cities in Gaza.
During a state dinner in Doha on Wednesday evening, the Emir of Qatar asked US President Donald Trump to use American pressure to bring peace in the region.
Right now, even as we gather tonight, our teams are engaged in intensive diplomacy to secure a ceasefire in Gaza, to protect all civilians, especially innocent women and children, and ensure the release of all hostages. This conflict is the key to wider stability in the region, from the West Bank to Yemen to Lebanon, and time is short. The people across the region are watching, not for words, but for outcomes. They are waiting to see if this moment brings that peace. They looked at your incredible comeback, at your ability to bring together people of all faiths, and your arrival back at the White House with hope. Your message that the aid will be delivered, and perhaps that a political solution providing safety, justice, and security to all involved in the conflict can be reached. Mr. President, your involvement could catalyze a breakthrough where others have stalled, but only if done in concert with serious partners. Qatar brings the channels, the access, and the credibility. The United States brings power, leverage, and global weight. If we act together, we have a real shot at ending the bloodshed and restoring regional confidence. Mr. President, tonight we don't just mark a visit. We reaffirm a working alliance between two sovereign nations and a shared commitment between two leaders who believe peace comes from strength. Let this visit not just reinforce our alliance, but demonstrate that when leaders act, peace moves closer.
Let's bring in Faisal Al-Mudakka. He's editor-in-chief at Gulf Times. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Mudakka. We do appreciate it. I do want to start with those comments from Qatar's Emir on Wednesday evening, because the Palestinian issue is obviously very important to Qatar, but there were no major announcements on this issue during Trump's visit. How do you see that?
I want to stay positive, but you have seen what happened in Gaza last night, on the massacre of bombing a hospital. But I still see that there is a huge chance. But I will refer to His Highness' speech. Qatar will provide the channels and the access, and the U.S. has to step into and bring the power. So really, it's a combination of both things, and I think we have seen it always before. We don't want the escalation in Lebanon and then the escalation in Syria, and we have seen now a light in the end of the tunnel. This Syrian thing was supposed to escalate, but leaders from the region have got together and have stopped it.
And certainly Trump announcing that his intention to lift U.S. sanctions on Syria and then meeting the transitional president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, is a very significant takeaway from this trip. The Gulf states that he is visiting, Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, they have great economic leverage, don't they? Can they use that leverage with this administration to make this U.S. administration a stabilizing force in the region?
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing is politics. Politics, if it does not come with economic, which does not benefit politic and by relationship, which will be only an effort with no sense, right? I think the Gulf now has its leverage, the leaders, and I think the U.S. also fed up from bad talks its friends, and the whole world is looking for the future. People, stopped wars. People, they read on wars in history and books, and now today. Our children, youth, everybody watching it on TV, that's not acceptable. That's not acceptable at all. Children wants to be in a safeguard. Children want to be in schools. How many people have dismantled? This is not really acceptable. And I think the, His Highness and Prince Mohammed and the effort of Erdogan have proved that with their influence and getting together and with America, have eliminated a huge problem by integrating Syria to the...
Donald Trump even said today that the lifting of sanctions on Syria was because of the pressure or the influence, in fact, of the Turkish president, the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, but also the Emir of Qatar. And the Emir of Qatar, he really credited with trying to de-escalate tensions. With Iran, he talked about how there are many others who would like the US to be much more hawkish with Iran, but it's trying to choose the path of peace.
I think the only solution for Iran is the dialogue. And Iranians are, it's a neighboring country. Full of talent, it's a huge land and resource, and it can be also an opportunity for the U.S. I mean, the Iranians themselves, they said, we welcome America to invest. So everybody understands, the language of economic and a language of sustainability. The mediation has been in Oman, and I think Qatar can play a big part on that.
Shares of Walmart fell as much as 5% Thursday morning, after executives said the retail giant, known for its advertising of low prices, will have to start raising them later this month due to the high cost of tariffs. The announcement is a clear signal that U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war is filtering through to the American economy, even to a company noted for its ability to manage costs more aggressively than rivals to keep prices low. Walmart also declined to provide a profit forecast for the second quarter, even as the company's U.S. comparable sales surpassed expectations in the first quarter. It also posted a quarterly profit that topped estimates. U.S. shoppers will start to see prices rise at the end of May and certainly in June, Walmart's chief financial officer John David Rainey said in a CNBC interview. On a post-earnings call with analysts, he said the retailer would also have to cut back on orders as it considers price elasticity. As the largest importer of container goods in the United States, Walmart is heavily exposed to tariffs. Walmart's CEO Doug McMillon said the retailer would not be able to absorb all the tariff costs because of narrow retail margins. However, he said he was committed to ensuring that tariff-related costs on general merchandise, which come primarily from China, do not drive food prices higher. Separately, a report from the Commerce Department said U.S. retail sales growth slowed in April. It showed that a boost from households front-loading car purchases ahead of tariffs was fading, and that households pulled back on other spending, including on airline tickets and hotel stays, due to economic uncertainty.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
progress update on Charlestown Police Station renovation in Nevis. IMF Executive Board concludes 2025 Article 4 consultation with St. Kitts and Nevis. Forestry and climate change being examined in Guyana. China pledges deeper ties with Latin America and the Caribbean. Internationally, Burkina Faso attack. Al-Qaeda affiliate says 200 soldiers killed in attack on military base.
Thank you for listening.